Alexander was killed?
One of the members in the triumvirate, Caesar, Pompeius, Crassus. He plundered the temple of Jerusalem. It was much of gold. He put up an army, about 150,000, and marched against Iran. At that time, under Parthian rule, it happens to be so, there was a general in the Parthian army. His name has gone to the history. His name was Surena.
Kill him.
And what did General Surena?
Beat the Crassus.
Yeah. He captivated all the Roman army. It was just head outspread. And Crassus was a dead man. And his son had the department of the army, who was a dead man too. And then he sent the head of Crassus to Orontes, the Parthian king at the time. And he was at a theater and see at the Greek drama Bacchus. Then a servant came with a packet and he took it, and there was Crassus' head. I had to mention that. I have a long... Yeah. And then we have the Sassanids, and we know so well what a big dynasty the Sassanid was. And we know the disaster. Depending on our religion, maybe. I used to say, listen to a Swedish man, and listen carefully. The Christians tried for 800 years by Trajanus, Crassus, Marcus Antonius to crush Iran. All of them failed. The Christianity has gone far in the Zoroastrian Empire, but they couldn't do anything. They was whipped out all the time. Then come the Arabs. And the Arabs did what the Christians not could do. That's interesting, isn't it? They did. What's my time? Am I out of time?
No, you're not.
Oh, you tell me if I... Well, to visit this place is, of course, a pleasure. Now I remember what I have to quote from you. Because when a man like me look at the Iranian history, we fall in a trap. And an Iranian lecturer working in American University has published a book, Iran in World Politics, The Question of the Islamic Republic. But that's not the question I'm going to quote. His name is Ashin Adib Moghadam. And if you allow me, he says something that say to me, I have quoted this in my book, but I hadn't understand it, but now I understand it. And listen carefully. It has become a truism that almost everyone has something to say about Iran. Whether on the Achaemenid kings, the legend of Sherazade, Persepolis, the peak of från, the splendor of Isfahan, or more recently, Ayatollah Khomeini and the Islamic Revolution. And this give impression for an outsider's brain, because what he's saying following and they think that's Iran. We think, and that's not Iran. Of course it's not. It's 70 million inhabitants, isn't it? So I find this interesting for a foreigner. Anyway, some pictures. This picture is interesting for me. For after being in Fars, Shiraz, I have bought some books, and one of them have this picture, and the text say that this is Pasarade. Excuse me for the... it's called King Solomon's prison. And it come through my brain, yes, you was going around there all the day. Didn't you see this? No, you didn't, because that's its distance between Persepolis and this building. And one day I was sitting and look at my old pictures, and if there is pictures from your camera, and I found this picture, and it was an aha. There it is. Yeah, I have to go quickly now. The Achaemenid was falling for Alexander the Great. Then we have the Seleucids and the trying to Hellenize Iran. I said it was succeeded in some way, but in some way no. And here we have mention of Crassus. So then came the followers. Well, let's see what I did on the next. Yeah, I took. Oh yes, I have translated it. Good. You can read it faster than me. Edvard Lehmann is a Swedish researcher in the beginning of the 19th century, and I have quoted from him. And I think he gave a strong picture of the Iranian society, don't he? It became apparent that the Persians was in possession of a great formal ability that first of all was manifested at the political area. They created a national ruling system, keeping the world empire intact in 200 years, and, after the fall of it, succeeded to let the national Persia rise again with rejuvenated power. When this Persia was broken, the Persian statesmanship became a heritage passed to the Arabs, and even today this statesmanship is typical for West and Central Asian state policy. It's a nice word, isn't it? This is for non-Iranians. There's Baghdad, Stephenson, the old Sassanidian capital, and Babylon. It's much of this in the book, but we have no time here. And then just two maps. You can see there the Achaemenian Empire, and then you can see the Sassanid Empire. And on this picture, a Sassanidian picture, don't forget that you see the line alongside all the Arabian Peninsula. And don't forget that in the south of Arabia Peninsula you have Yemen, that was an Sassanidian satrapy. So they have expanded, and then they have colonies alongside the Indian coast, east coast. And then came the Arabs. And of this picture, I will say I have a chapter 4. And I know that many Iranians have been reading the book of Islam and the chapter of Islam and Shia. And so far I have, no one have told me I have wrong. I try to give a straight picture. The map is, here is the way. Ali ibn Khalid, you remember him? He was going this way. And then, you know, the just to get free was haunted up to Merv in northeastern Khorasan. But do you know that his son became a general in the Chinese army? Did you know that? His name was Piros. It's a king name in Iran. Piros became a great and respected general in the Chinese army, and he was a grandson of Jastegid Free. Then I have the honor to have been in Just and Piresabs. You know Piresabs? In the mountains outside the province where Mr. Shatami was born, Ardakan. There we have when they was running from the Arabs, one of the daughters to Jastegid took refuge in the mountains, in the cliffs. And she was a Zoroastrian, it was Zoroastrian at that time. So they have on the cliff walls a big monastery. I have been there, and it's exciting. Oh, and do you know what I did? No. I asked the priest. There was the place, you know, for, what you say, well, the most holy place in the church or the mosque. I said to the, can I go inside there? Yes, no problem, but you have to change your clothes. So I have the white collar and white shoes and some sort of things here, and could get inside. And this place in the monastery is in a cliff with a stone floor, and there is some sort of instrument that pull water on. They do in many religions with water. And my wife took a picture on me, and I was almost doing the same in Kerman, because in Kerman they have a monastery too, very fine. And there I saw the fire. Of course they have the fire in Jas too, but I didn't look at that. I'm sorry for that, but I missed that. But I did it in Kerman. And even there, the priest came out, and he could speak English, so we began to talk about that. My wife took picture again. It's very funny. Anyway, what we say about this picture is that we have an Arabic expansion. You see here at it, and we have a new faith, Islam, and especially if we are talking about Iran, we must of course mention for the Swedish, there is two braids, and the minority is in Iran is called Shia, the majority is called Sunni. It's nothing for you, you know it so well, so it's uninteresting for you. But then even the Muslims have some resistance. In my book I call it the Iranian Renaissance. And I put forward what you know, but I must explain it for the Swedes. But we have a couple of local dynasties in the northeast of Iran. It was called the Tyrids, the Saffarids, the Samanids, the Sayarids, and the Khwarezmids. About the Saffarids, we can mention that Mr. Leif was on the edge to conquer Baghdad. But when he was prepared to take the last step, the Caliph have put some force together and beat him. The Tyrids is interesting. They build up was coming on the Samanids, because in these areas in the Central Asia, what did they have there? Silver. Baghdad was built on the silver from Central Asia. Mines opened on the Tyrids, and they have their golden age at the Samanids, one of the big dynasties in northeastern Iran and a little up after Khorasan. And there I told the Swedish listener that the Samanid Empire of Iran and Central Asia was center for the Vikings trade in the east, because Swedish are love to talk about the Vikings, and that's not bad. That was clever. But the connection was via the Samanids Empire. And at this time, you can see that, at this time we have the Crusades house. I have been reading very well to see to what extent the crusade was connected to Iran. But I must say, I know I have learned people before me, but is it correct to say that the Crusades does not directly come close to Iran? Or, I'm shouting. But they're happening under this time. And then it's an important picture, I must translate this. The local dynasty, we was talking about them, they was striving for independence. They had to slow down for the Ghaznavids, Turkish flowing. And then come an extremely big Turkish dynasty, the Seljuks. And there we have especially one name at side of the kings, Nizam al-Mulk. He's interesting for the Europeans of the simple reason that in Europe we talk about 500 years a man called Machiavelli. But what he was writing was a blue copy of what Nizam al-Mulk already has been writing. And they never tell us in Western literature. Never. But I tell it. Then came the Mongols. And we know that the Caliphate in Baghdad was falling. And after Genghis Khan, it was not Genghis Khan, it was his son, Hulagu. Hulagu. You know, he took the assassins, he had the way over northern Iran. And there you had the assassins, the Ismailites. And there was very bloody fightings there, very bloody fighting. But he came through and down and put out the Caliph. And after him was a chain of hereditaries. the Ilkhans. And they was followed by the Muzaffarid, very blue Muslims, the Muzaffarids. You know that Hafiz, the man who told us how pleasant it could be to drink a little wine, he said, because with the Muzaffarids there was no wine in the central Iran. So when they was swept away, if I can remember what he said, he said, the Muzaffarids was going up like a sun, but they was going down in the same way, quickly, so to say. It's Hafiz. It's not correct quoting, but it's Hafiz. I'm going faster now because I begin to understand that my time begin to get out. Excuse me. And you are tired. I have been on lectures myself, and until I'm so tired, so I can't stop sometimes. So no. You know, after the Muzaffarids, we have the Timur Lenk, and I have done this translation today because in the original I forgot one thing, because I said that it was a period of terror in Iran, and it's quite true. It was. You know, the 70,000 head in a pyramid outside Isfahan. So it was a period of terror, but also of architecture. It was a time of architecture. I have been at the old mosque in just its museum today, with the high minarets. I took a photograph on the front corner, not for to say because it's destroyed. They don't repair it. There is exceptions from that, because in Kerman, in the marketplace and so on, you know, Marco Polo was staying there when he was going to China. When I was there, I was repairing that part, so it was digged up. But they have finished the entrée to the caravanserai part, and I took a picture, and that's the best picture I have been doing in Iran, because it was a digital camera, and it is now scanned. But despite that, it's a marvelous picture on the figuration on the entrance there. Very nice. And do you remember Karakunli or Kakunlu? There was two big empires. They was fought, it was war with them, and they was geographically very big for a while. Not so long time, but let's say about some 100 years. But then happened something else in the Iranian history. For there come a man, a son of the someone called himself Shaif Safi al-Din, Ismail. And he was a warrior of the first class. He whipped out Karakunlu and Akunlu in two battles, 15-1 and 15-3. And he founded the Safavid dynasty. And he declared himself as Shah, Ismail I, and with a Shia Muslim background, he declared the state as belonging to the Shia 12ers faith. he had problem. You know that better than me, because at that time, Iran was mainly sunny. At that time, but he had to transform it to the Shia. I have some pages of this in the book. It's interesting. Yes, just some picture. When I was here, I took what you say in English. Can anyone translate sedel? Man tar en sedel. Vad är en sedel? Ja, en sedel som man tar på. Säg det på persiska. Sedel. I took a sedel. I was standing in the middle here. And it was silent. So I took sedeln så här. Did so. And you could hear the song. It's 58 meters up to it's amazing. And the Loftolla, the photo talks for itself. It needs no comments. It's amazing. Yeah, unfortunately, I say shortly what you already know. You know, the last period of the Safavids was a disastering time. You remember that. The last Safavids tried to take care of the Turks. The Turks was attacking. They tried to take care of the Afghans from east and from, and they was beaten and beaten and beaten. But there was one man coming in the picture, and you know who he was Nader Shah. And he stopped it. If Nader Shah, if you haven't found Nader Shah that time, I can assure you, you was either Turkish or Russians today. The breakdown of the society at the end of the 7th century was total. But Nader Shah was a strong man. He was really a strong man. So he put it on feet again. You know, he took India, he took Lahore, and the Peacock från, you know, the Kohinoor and all this, you remember. He said Iran was, but he was a cruel man at the same time. A real cruel man. Anyway, he was murdered by one of his generals, and this man, he was the founder of the Indian Durrani dynasty, a big dynasty in India who has a tremendously impact on Iran on the middle of the 18th century, on the Qadars. Especially the war with the Brits around Herat. There we have the background and the Durrani dynasty. This is the Sun Castle in Kalat, the border to Turkmenistan, and to come through there you go, this was the way in, and this was the watching tower. Behind here you find the castle, and there you have Nader Shah in Mashhad. My picture is not so good. Sometimes I am disappointed how I handled my camera. I could have done it better. Anyway, Nader Shah, he was followed of the Sand dynasty. This is from Just and the old remainings from the Sand dynasty. And it's such a short dynasty. You see here, 1751, roughly 1794. But then, my friends, we have Aga Muhammad Shah and the foundation of the Qajar dynasty. And I say here shortly, the Qajar dynasty was the stamp for the 18th century. Iran was opened up, there became an infrastructure and an industrialization, but there was at the same time a resistance from the religious parts of the society. And the 18th century then, later on, in the beginning of the 19th century, 1906 and 11, was leading us to the constitutional revolution, as you well remember. I have developed this in my book, I promise, because it's a long history and it's a deep history, and it's interesting. But to sit here and just, I can't, it's impossible. It was all the 18th century, said no. Clever. Part 3. This is the law. I'm going quickly now, you have to excuse me because you are tired. As we have the concessions under the 18th century. You sold out your own country, you sold out the oil, you sold the tobacco, you sold everything. And of course you have protests from the floor, and partly from the population, but partly from the mullahs, from the mujtahids. They didn't like this. Then they started 2 wars with the Russians, the Qajars. And you know, they lost both of them, totally. And you lost Armenia, you lost Azerbaijan, and so on. It was a disaster. That's the same. And then came the constitutional revolution, reforms and conflicts, and then I just will mention you have foreign influences. In some way breaking the society, in some way meeting hard resistance. And then you have to excuse me, but I'm talking about Akhundzadeh and all of these men who, Malcolm, I see you know. So, protesting against the Qajar dynasty. And then we have the murdering of Nasruddin Shah. I have a picture on the mausoleum where he was killed in this book. So the last part of the 18th century was in some way a falling line. There is the wars. I just, 1811, you see the text. And you lost territories. I'm soon going to end, I promise, I promise. This is the building where the constitutional revolution, the parliament on the constitutional revolution. It's very nice. They have rebuilt it with windows, and it's museum. It's very nice. Very nice. And then just remember the zone department of Iran. The British were the Russian and the neutral zone. Unfortunately, mostly Iranians think that the British sphere included Abadan and the oil, but that's not correct. The British zone was in the east. So the oil area still was in Iranian hands, but on the contrary, we know very well that the British took the oil, and we know they was supported by the Bakhtiars, these devil Bakhtiars. They helped the British to take the oil. This is my last chapter. The great power play against our time, Mossadegh, the coup, and the copy of Mossadegh's land reform when the second Shah tried to do a white revolution, a totally downfall, because this was some sort of copy of Mossadegh, and it wasn't done in the proper way. And so on the doorstep we had the Islamic